All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We wanted to share with you some of our experiences in terms of the challenges that we have faced as we implement passwordless authentication across some of our clients, and some solutions that have worked for us and hopefully can work for you guys as well. Next slide. Okay. My name is Laveen Varghese. I'm a director in KPMG. I focus on helping our clients through their entire identity and access management transformation lifecycle journey. And I have with me Chase.
Yeah, so I'm Chase Evans. Well, my mic is way hotter than yours. I'm a manager in cybersecurity at KPMG. Do you want to switch mics? Man. I'm also focused a lot on strategy from implementation, a lot of MFA, authentication, zero trust type engagements. So happy to be here. Sorry, clicker. Not cooperating. All right, so to get started, kind of want to tell you what this conversation is going to be about and what it's not going to be about. So we're not here to talk about why you should go passwordless or convince you that it's the greatest thing. It's more once you feel like your organization, your company is ready for passwordless authentication. These are the types of challenges you're going to expect, both from a human element of the user adoption side to a technical challenges you might face from implementation. So that kind of leads to our agenda here. So we're just going to have a quick overview of what passwordless is, kind of what we're talking about, set the stage a little bit. I'm going to cover the user adoption side, the human element of things. I'm going to hand over to Laveen. She's going to talk about implementation challenges. And finally, we're going to talk about a real-life use case where we did this at a large company to just kind of wrap things up for everyone. All right, so real quick. Some of these statistics might surprise you. Some of them might not. As of today, this is just a rough estimate. About 80% of hacking-related incidents are directly related to a compromised password. On top of that, this clicker is not working. Okay, on top of that, 70% of users use the same password across both their personal and work accounts. And to make that even worse, whenever they've been impacted by a breach, 55% of those users do not change their password. And then finally, as we've seen, a lot of organizations already see, 92% of them today see that passwordless is the future of authentication. So it's naturally heading there. This is where we're going as an organization. Okay, so first of all, just real quickly, what is passwordless authentication? It's not the removal of password as we know. It's replacing it with stronger, phish-resistant, stronger authentication methods. The ones that we're talking about specifically today, first one is going to be your native options. These are ones that are typically built into the platform, cost-efficient, require some setup but not a lot. These are like Windows Hello for Business, passkeys. Next, we have biometrics, pretty self-explanatory. And then these last two are going to be focused on a physical token that's like a FIDO key or a software token that's going to be like your phone, a device, et cetera. And lastly, just some real quick benefits we're talking about with passwordless. Resistant to phishing attacks. Like I said, these are phish-resistant capabilities. Prevents credential stuffing. Blocks brute force algorithms, improves the overall user experience for the end user, and then finally, some of these are very cost-friendly options. Okay, so let's get started on the user adoption side. So talking about the human element here, let's start going through some of them. So first off, a lot of times, especially in frontline workers, in our specific use case, people who are facing a customer, in user-facing type roles, there's a lot of resistance to change. I've been doing this way for a long time. It adds a different complexity to my role. That's a challenge we've seen a lot. Just to resolve that, a lot of things we're seeing is we've been using as a phase implementation. So this focuses on targeting a pilot group, a friendly user trial, if you will, to gather feedback, talk about what's lessons learned, whether it was a unclear registration process, unclear guides on how to register, how to authenticate, et cetera. Secondly, privacy concerns. We heard this a few times in a lot of technical roles. How are you using my biometrics today? Just make sure that there's not type of storing of biometrics. If there's any type of breach or incident like that, their biometrics aren't going to be leaked. And so what we did here is we did a lot of education campaigns focused on just making sure people understood that these biometrics are not being stored in a central database. They're not going to be compromised. They're central to the device that they're being used for. Third one here, this is awareness and understanding. So just basically a general misunderstanding about how passwordless can be stronger than passwords today. And really what we did here with this one is we took a lot of business units and went to the leaderships of those business units, met with them, had a conversation about, what to expect. These are really interactive conversations. You could build like newsletters, have just a discussion with them to ask questions, just gather more information about passwordless in general. And then lastly, I won't spend too much time on this one, but accessibility concerns. A lot of these products today do have this built into consideration, making sure that their authentication methods do meet the needs of all types of users. And this is really important. So just lastly, just making sure you have a user experience focus whenever you deliver these capabilities.
All right, I think you want to.
I could do it.
Okay. Thanks. All right, moving on. So those were the user side concerns, right? As we looked at the implementation journey, technical challenges were a big part of it, which also affected the user adoption. First one. Yeah. So as you look at your stack, you are going to very quickly realize you have a lot of legacy applications, you have VDIs, you have remote desktops, the whole gamut. Not everything works as seamlessly with the newer protocols. So what ends up happening is the user experience is varied and primarily quite negative across the board. What we did in this particular case was made sure, you understand the requirements very, very early. You understand your tech stack. You identify these patterns, design patterns, where we know passwordless does not work seamlessly very early, and then make sure there's some leadership buy-in early in your process. So if there is configuration work needed, if there is upgrades needed, if there is onboarding to an IDP, everything, all of these need time, effort, and lots of attention from the app teams. There is leadership buy-in early enough so that these development activities can be prioritized. The next one is, it's a whole gamut. I've bucketed it as usability concerns. As you collect requirements, you'll realize that there are legal concerns. California state has something very unique where if you want to make an employee use a factor, you need to have paid for it. There are business concerns. If there is a call center, you can't use your phone. If I'm in front of a customer, I cannot open my phone and click the approve on my phone. I am using iPads. A security key cannot be consistently plugged in. It breaks, the port gets damaged. There are shared devices, so something like Windows Hello for Business doesn't always scale that well. So there are business-related concerns that you have to that you have to consider. The solution that we did for this, capture all the requirements up front. That's a no-brainer. Make sure you capture all the different work streams and their unique requirements. Constraints are going to be very different for someone who's customer-facing versus someone who's back office. Make sure you're doing that, and then there's a lot of focus on pilot groups where the feasibility of options are tested out. Next. All right. You implement passwordless on your authentication process. Great. A very big step forward from a security perspective, kudos. What you quickly realize is the main authentication flow is secure. Now the attackers are targeting the tertiary or the secondary processes like registration, re-registration. I've lost my phone. I have lost, my factor was stolen. So these secondary processes also need some attention, some revisit to make sure it is aligned with this new way of authenticating that you have developed. Just doing passwordless authentication in your authentication workflow doesn't always help. So the solution for this, introduce identity proofing, different level of factors. Obviously, there's an assurance level. You don't need it for everything, but try to introduce it, do a risk assessment, introduce it when needed. If you're re-registering for privileged access, as an example. So take the factor assurance level into mind as you think through the process redesign. if there are, if you are developing, a place where people can go and register their security key, as an example, make sure security is built in much early. There are cases where you develop the whole portal in a nutshell, like in a silo, and security is an afterthought, and there's a whole lot of rework associated with that. And then making sure that security and usability is balanced from a user adoption perspective. You want to make it tough enough for the bad guys, but not too tough for your employees or your partners. Yeah. The next one is device concerns. Again, this is quite overloaded. Chase covered some of it. Now there is a reliance on a secondary factor, a secondary device that needs to be on you for the most part, or different devices. If you are doing something on a Mac or if you have a PC, your experience is not the same. So we heard a whole lot of concerns. We heard a whole lot of, I've forgotten my factor, I am stuck. So make sure there are backup options that you're considering. Make sure that you are, your support network is going to be your best friend. Help desk, empower them with the right tools, the right guides, the right, any and every material that you can think of. These are the people who get the calls. If they are able to triage, they are able to calm the users down, that's where you really win. Can we go to the next one? Tying all of this back together, we implemented this at a large telecom company. There were about 200K users, employees, contractors, privileged users. We had vendor partners. So there was a whole different types of user bases that we had to cover. We carved them out into 4 main work streams. One was the frontline, or the retail as they were calling it. There were help desk or call centers. There was the back office, which is your regular employees. And then privileged access was our 4th work stream that we focused on. As I mentioned on the slides earlier, making sure for each of the work streams there was a very detailed constraint analysis that was done. What will work, what will not work. Literally, Chase was sitting right along with them in these call centers, observing how they operate, right? There are things they'll bring up to you in the requirements gathering, things they will not. So make sure there's a whole lot of observation that's going up. Work that you do upfront will help you with the user adoption later. Usability focus, again, think of backup options. Think, in general, one thing we have realized is we have to give a backup. One size doesn't fit all. Incentivize adoption. This one was unique. We made it such that the different VPs were competing against each other, made it available, a dashboard, just trying to make sure people knew how far along they were, not along, and just prodding through the competitive edge a little bit. OCM is going to be very, very important. You are going to send an email, you're going to send newsletters, you're going to create a website, you're going to point people to it 10 different ways. There's a very big chance they are still not going to consume the information or will still have questions. So roll out support, which is empowering your help desk, empowering folks who are leading the rollout with all the right materials to help navigate through the questions and answer any concerns. All right. Key outcomes that we achieved: passwordless options, implemented a workstream-driven rollout across the 4 work streams, and met the end user needs that were catered towards that work stream. Self-service processes, as I mentioned this, for registration, for re-registration, making sure there was redesign of the whole process, and a secure portal was set up where people could go in, register, identity proofing. was also a big part of that journey, of that life cycle. The last piece of this, it says 0 to 100 in 6 months. It was 0 to 100 in 6 months, but there was a whole lot of pre-work that led us to being able to, cover 200K identities in that 6 months. So it's 6 months of rollout and a whole lot of planning, design, upfront communications, leadership buy-in that allowed us the 6-month journey. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, summarizing it very quickly. Haven't heard the whole presentation, that's fine. Remember these 4 things, it'll help you, or at least we think it'll help you. First, most organizations are scared of leaders. You think bottom up when you think rollout. Try top down, it actually works in a lot of cases. So leadership buy-in, easy one, but make leaders your key allies in this, make them early adopters. If they buy into the vision, if they buy into the experience, chances are their teams are going to adopt it much faster.
And I mentioned earlier the Passwordless road shows. I mean, these are your audience, right? The VPs of the orgs, different areas.
Thanks. I said this earlier, one size won't fit all. Make sure there are backup options. Make sure you're considering at least 2 to 3 options for the entire organization. Don't spread yourself too thin, even that's not smart, but 2 to 3 options that should cater to most of your work streams or your different types of users, the various nuances that they may have.
Yeah, and then next, balance security and user experience. So, I mean, we don't need people authenticating every single time they access an application. If they're accessing the device using a strong phish-resistant authentication method like Windows Server Business, for example, when they access a web app, it shouldn't re-prompt them, right? Like, we want them to understand that passwordless is a better experience, but it's also more secure. So taking advantage of conditional access policies to make sure that, you are stepping up when you need to, but overall, I mean, balance that security with that in user experience.
Even from a process perspective, for registration, your employee registration, you know them, you trust them, should be slightly simpler as compared to vendor partners, as an example. So balance security with usability.
Yeah. Yeah, and then lastly, we mentioned this earlier, that 6-month timeline, right? Like all the planning was in the initial part. So invest in planning, spend a lot of time up front, building out your plans, designing really solid self-service, secure registration processes, identity proofing, which he's mentioned several times. Spending that time there will save you incredible amount of time on actual deployment with these technologies and passwordless authentication. So that's it. Thank you, guys.
That's it for us.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone? Yes.
Yeah. How big was your implementation team?
I want to say about 10 to 12 people focused on this. Partners, application teams, your access management. So there are definitely other stakeholders that will be involved. I'm not counting them, but 10 to 12 dedicated people on this one.
Yeah, I would say that doesn't include like logistics of shipping physical software or hardware keys. Yeah. Go ahead.
Did you guys do any passkeys, and what was the user acceptance on the passkeys?
We actually didn't do passkeys. Funny enough, Microsoft was rolling out passkeys while we were doing it, and so it was actually causing conflicts when we were trying to get people to register FIDO tokens. They would register them as a passkey instead.
The timing of it was such that Microsoft had not fully rolled it out, so it was not one of the ones.
But we did put that as a native option to explore for sure.
Yes, as a future option, as we did this. Yes.
Have you experienced situations where enterprises are using a passwordless option when the passwordless option is the same device for MFA, and how you kind of mitigate that risk?
Yeah, we had that actually in our retail environments. We mentioned that work stream. They work on an iPad, and so the actual authenticator was a Microsoft Authenticator within the iPad. So in that case, it was accessing an app and then being triggered for a push notification on that same device. So we had to make sure that the login to the actual device was secured in order to make that a valid authentication method, right? You don't want to be passcode 1234 and then they have authenticator app.
Yeah. The other piece where we were going towards was the one-to-one mapping for the iPads. Right now the rollout was focused on the shared model, but we were working towards the one-to-one model as well. So that was the other piece. So you know that this device is truly mapped to just one person. Other questions? We can pick on people. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for joining. It's great having you.